and welcome to a very special edition of America Can We Talk. We've had the great opportunity to do a show, record a show outside of our studio. I'm actually here in the North Texas area and at the Heritage Ranch Republican Club. It's a great active club. Anyone in North Texas should know about it. Heritage Ranch Republican Club. It's the biggest Republican club in Texas. They hold fabulous meetings, get great speakers. You can check out their website and figure out and buy tickets to go to the next event. But the reason we're here this morning is that last night, Ann Vandersteel spoke to a sold-out crowd here, and this is a large facility, a sold-out crowd here at Heritage Ranch Republican Club. And I jumped on the opportunity, since she happened to be in Texas, to see if I could talk to her for an hour or so and do it as a special America Can We Talk show. So this is where we are, what we're doing. So welcome, Ann Vandersteel.
Oh, Debbie, great to be back with you again. Thank you so much for hosting.
You were. I was meant to look up and I didn't. You joined me on my show at some point in the last couple of years, and it was a lot of fun. I don't remember what the date was, but anyway, it's great to see you too. And you are just, I don't even know, whirlwind is a good word for you. You're just so energetic. So first of all, I just commend you for all that you do, and for our listeners, you can find on Ann Vandersteel on X, it's just at Ann Vandersteel, or go to annvandersteel.com or AmericanMadeFoundation.org. We'll be talking about that too. So I want to start with something that I know you've talked about so much on your shows and interviews, but I don't think enough Americans understand what you did down in Darien Gap, why you went down there, and where Darien Gap is, what was the story, why you went down there. It was an amazing, I just want to, whatever the story is, I want to commend you because you're brave. You actually went down there versus stay home and read a good story and make a report. So just take a bunch of time and tell us about what happened down there.
Well, I mean, President Trump has definitely put Panama on the map again, and he's talking about the Panama Canal, and recently the announcement of BlackRock taking over the ports on both sides of the canal back from the Chinese control, giving it back to an American corporation is a big deal because we were losing control of the canal. We were losing really the influence that America has had when we actually owned and operated the canal.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter gave it away. You know, Panama did not build that, we built that. Now they have come alongside with a consortium of other countries in the past so many years and built a second Panamax canal, which is much bigger piece of canal property to move big super tankers through. But again, that effort was done and completed in 10 years, and we lost a lot of American lives doing it. A lot of people from around the world contributed, but America really put Panama on the map. But it was, again, the majority of the traffic that goes through it is for the benefit of the United States. 76% of all cargo ends up here in our country. So we have a vested interest. It's also a very strategic national security interest for our military to move our our Navy from east to west. If we have issues going on abroad, perhaps in the Pacific, perhaps maybe Taiwan becomes an issue. This is of significant concern. Why Panama was also of significant concern was after Joe Biden assumed the presidency in 2020 under, as we now know, fraudulent conditions. The first thing he did was disregard Title 42 and open up the borders. And the influx of people coming across our southern border was predominantly coming through Panama in an area called the Darien Gap, which is a 60-mile wide strip of jungle and very dangerous, treacherous mountains with lots of rivers going through it. That is really only home to indigenous, the Imbara, the Kuna Indians, et cetera, that came into that area when Balboa explored for gold 500 years ago. So that area of the jungle, besides being run by the Imbara, which are living in an agrarian society and farming and just living in harmony with nature, as Klaus Schwab would want, you have the cartels, which really set up a stronghold between Colombia, Venezuela, and of course Central America and Mexico. And those cartels were heavily funded by non-governmental organizations out of the United Nations budget, for which the Americans are funding by a factor of 17-1 the majority of the money to the UN. So in essence, the United Nations funded non-governmental organizations that help these cartels move millions of people over the past 10 years, but predominantly in the last 4 under Biden, through the Darien Gap. And they took advantage of the Imbara Indians. They took over their reservations. They set up housing complexes for the different NGOs that were funded by the UN and just stepped all over a beautiful part of the world that was living peacefully until, of course, our money showed up and did this. But again, we were building our own gallows, Debbie, because we were importing people from 190 countries, state sponsors of terror. Venezuela emptied their prisons. Afghanistan emptied their prisons. Cuba emptied their prisons. Colombia emptied their prisons. So we were taking in the refuse and the scourge Tren de Aragua, one of the most deadly criminal organizations, gangs from Venezuela, MS-13 coming out of El Salvador, and other nations were all coming into our country, in addition to, we now know of and we reported on, surface-to-air missiles that came over that were Iranian-made. So while we were, basically subverting our own constitution, while Joe Biden was categorically ignoring Article 4, Section 4 to send our military to fortify our borders, so were our 50 governors ignoring Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, where the states have the right to defend their borders. So we've been dismissed by our government at every level, from top to bottom. And the people need to understand that Panama, which was a crown jewel for America in terms of that canal and what it represents to national security and our sustenance, our supply chain, has been forsaken. And so the reason we went there under Operation Burning Edge was to expose all that. And the results of Operation Burning Edge, specifically in Panama, was the summary dismissal of the NGO known as Doctors Without Borders, because they were setting up a tent and never had a doctor on site. In fact, many times when we showed up into these camps, the Doctors Without Borders tent, we would check on people. We became the doctors. We were administering medical service and aid to people that had come through this 5-day treacherous track through a jungle. So it was really an expose on how evil the NGOs are, how many billions of dollars are being siphoned into their pockets and nothing to do with saving these people that were coming to America for a better life. And also we exposed the non-governmental organizations' control over the Panamanian government, which resulted in a regime change in Panama. And now you have Jose Raul Molino as the president of Panama, who looks at the work that we did as very favorable. Their military, if you will, is center front. It looks at the work we did as extremely favorable because we highlighted the work that they were trying to do to fortify their borders and protect their Panamanian citizens and us as an operation that just couldn't sustain what the Americans were funding that was overwhelming them. So it really had a significant impact down there. And again, President Trump became keenly aware of the significance of their border, China's representation all over Latin America, and the impact it was having here in Texas, including your beautiful city of Houston, Colony Ridge, that's full of MS-13.
Can't wait to talk about Colony Ridge. That was a great summary. When did you go down there?
We started, Michael Yon, I want to be very open about this. Michael Yon is really the leader of the pack.
Yes.
And
yeah.
Michael Yon is an incredibly famous war correspondent, Green Beret, who has been covering wars all over the world for decades now. He started going down there right after Joe Biden was installed. He saw what was going to happen. He knew that's exactly going to be the leak point where this would occur. And so I started going down there in 23 and 24, and we took teams. We took the Epoch Times. We took Laura Loomer, who has a massive platform. And we took congressmen and aides and a whole host of people that were interested to get the word out about what was happening. So we had a wide swath and reaching a lot of demographics, which gave it really much worldwide attention, and it needed it.
It did need it. Just going back to the beginning, what you were describing, I think we haven't had in America under the 4 years of he who occupied the White House, Biden, we've had the southern border flooded, and for most part, most people, even the administration officials, even people in Congress, would speak of it as though it was, well, it's mostly poor people coming across, or maybe some bad guys too, maybe some drug smugglers and bad guys. But this, what you're describing, what you uncovered and exposed, it is an organized and aided and abetted and orchestrated by our own government, facilitating of people who have, as you alluded to, or you mentioned, all of the people that were released from prison. Tren de Aragua is one example, but these people who clearly had criminal intent, and our government orchestrated that. And I am repeating for emphasis to say it's astonishing how many people don't realize that. And we'll still speak of the border as something about, well, in fact, there's an effort to dismiss the border issue still in some quarters, even on the Republican side. Well, we sound kind of harsh talking about that. It's just, and so we shouldn't do it. This is, it is phenomenal level. Just it's a treasonous attack on our own people, which ties into the next question I want to ask you. So what you uncovered and what we Americans became aware of this facilitated, orchestrated invasion of the southern border, do you think there is criminal culpability, or should be, for any of the players in our government who were enabling that?
Absolutely. I mean, this is orchestrated at the highest level. And again, you have to look at the media was complicit, because of course they were pushing the whole, it's a humanitarian effort. These poor people, they're coming here, it's women and children. I can tell you the women and children we saw were being facilitated by Customs and Border Protection and Catholic Charities, which Catholic Charities, again, is known for human trafficking. Our own government, Joe Biden, Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary for Department of Homeland Security, he was a former board member of one of the NGOs that was one of the biggest funders of movers of these people through Latin America, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. HIAS is a massive organization that has funded millions of people around the world, but predominantly focusing on getting them here into the United States. Ali Mayorkas is basically a Cuban communist. And this is who has been taking money not only from the State Department and from federal government, but funneling it into the UN and then through these NGOs, specifically his. His organization alone, HIAS, had an office right next to a camp in Darien Jungle, Panama, known as Camp San Vicente. In this specific camp, which was, by the way, next to this little, we call it the 5-star, 1-star hotel, because I'd get bed bugs and chiggers every time I stayed there. But
so sorry.
I know, it's part of the job. You know, you come out looking like a case of the measles. But this HIAS organization next to this camp was known for moving Chinese nationals, PLO members, through this camp. We would go get access because Centerfront, the military, was controlling and monitoring what was going in and out of these camps. They granted us access. And when you went in there, you didn't see a bunch of women and children. You saw a bunch of military-age men.
Yep.
And isn't it interesting, Debbie, that after we were there, within 1 week of really doing a big expose with Epoch Times and Loomer and ourselves all reporting, the one room, they had a bunch of trailers. Besides housing for these individuals, there was one trailer where Centerfront kept all the records of who was transiting through that camp.
Excuse me, who kept all the records?
Centerfront, the military.
Okay.
That trailer that housed all of the records of anybody that ever transited through this camp burned down in a bizarre fire.
Oh,
and you know what the cover story for the fire was? You're going to love this one. Supposedly there was a husband and wife that got into an argument and they started hurling Molotov cocktails at one another, and it set this trailer ablaze. And so they lost all the records, supposedly. And this is, again, a camp that Mayorkas would fly into yearly and bring cash and just visit this one particular camp. Now, why is that?
Yeah.
Why? Because HIAS was right next door, his former board position.
So, you know, this story is just explosive, and I'm troubled actually by thinking what percentage of Americans actually know this. I mean, your listeners do. Mine have heard bits and pieces. I'm glad to have the whole story coming from you. But I feel very troubled by what percentage of Americans don't know this. They don't understand what their government is doing to us. But specifically as to members of Congress, but we trust to really protect the American people. Do you have any sense of whether most members of Congress knew what was happening and just were quiet, or they didn't know? Do you have any sense of that?
Of course. I absolutely believe all members of Congress knew exactly what was going on. But again, we have to consider the source of who's paying the members of Congress. You know, there is a direct attack on America, on the idea that we represent through our original organic Constitution. We are supposed to be a nation of laws. We're supposed to be a nation where we have true representative form of government. Debbie, I submit to you, we don't have that now. We don't, you know, I spoke about this last night. The Apportionment Act of 1929 effectively silenced millions and millions of Americans because they limited the representation to only 435 members of Congress. We should have 6,600. If you
members of Congress?
Yes. If you go back and look at how the Constitution was designed, we were supposed to have one representative for every 30,000 constituents. We don't have anything like that.
Yeah, you know, and as the population grows, obviously in America,
right,
we retain, all we really do after a census every 10 years, we might readjust, you know, how many, based on the number of residents in each state, they may get more congressional districts. So California loses them, we get them, or Texas or other places do. But actually increasing the number of members of Congress so that you have a more reasonable number. That's very. I want to stick on this topic though. But again, I really commend you for going down and getting that story out there. I do think too, as Trump has come into office, he's aware of what was happening. Do you believe?
Of course, absolutely. I mean, he's aware of the Brian Terry story, one of the Bortec, agents that worked for CPB that was murdered through Fast and Furious. Again, Fast and Furious, the Obama Eric Holder botched gun running operation was not about a botched gun running operation. It was about arming the cartels. That is exactly what it was about. It was about sending arms not only to the cartels but over into Benghazi. We have Fast and Furious victims that we're going to be bringing back out. We're going to be suing the federal government over this. This is a big deal that can track the weapons that were in their store being stolen by the ATF. Those serial numbers, guess where they ended up? Benghazi.
The Fast and Furious gun
Guns.
running ended up with gun. Okay, that part I did not know. On
Yes.
Fast and Furious, it's kind of a good example to shift to the next topic. So Fast and Furious happened under Obama, and there's a very small number of congressmen saying something's really wrong here. They finally, and I'm going to say it was 2 years. I think Obama was out of office 2 years
Mm-hmm.
later or so. There was a study, and they actually Congress did some commission at a big study, and I don't know the date of it, but they had a long report, and they were triumphantly saying, "Look, we did a report. Look what happened." And they recounted what happened with Fast and Furious, and then and maybe it made some headway or made open some eyes, but then nothing happened. And I think it's I was waiting for, and therefore you're going to do what about this? There was
Right.
no culpability, no responsibility.
Why doesn't the sergeant at arms just arrest these people? I mean, the sergeant at arms can do that. They have a brig downstairs beneath Congress. The sergeant at arms could, if Eric Holder was held in contempt of Congress because he wasn't going to answer the questions,
Right.
why didn't they arrest Eric Holder? Instead, he ends up at Covington Burley getting paid $1 million a year, the very same law firm whose attorney, Robert Kellner, fudged the FARA paperwork for General Flynn so that General Flynn would get embroiled in one scandal, which led to another with a fudged 302 document by the FBI.
Yep.
Again, you have people that are designed in Congress that are owned by special interests that want to continue their control of America, the corporation. And we don't have, like I said, if we had more members of Congress, it would take a lot more money for these corporations, these special interests, to own everybody. They only have to own 435 people. If you had a real representative form of government with 6,600, thereabouts, I'm just rounding the numbers, it would be a lot more expensive for these corporations to own and control. And when they're sitting at home in their home office, Debbie, they can't be controlled like they can on Capitol Hill, where they can be set up and drugged and, compromising pictures and all the stuff that we know goes on. I mean, some of the people like Madison Cawthorn, God bless him, but he spoke out about it.
He did.
And look what happened.
Yeah. On that subject, I have said many times in the last 10 years, especially, I feel like I used to be more of a cupcake or kind of too Pollyanna. I mean, I love the founding documents. I love the meaning of the Declaration and the Constitution and what America is. So I talk in my speeches and everything on my talk show. I'm always about the unique greatness of America. And I have come to realize more and more it has so little connection to what actually happens in Washington. And that shouldn't be shocking, but it really is. I mean, you would mostly like to think that the people who campaign, they come and tell you how much they believe in whatever they're saying, the First Amendment and freedom of speech, and they believe in this, believe in that. And it's like all of us are being played by these people who, I mean, we vote for them because this person seems better than that person, so we vote for that person. But they go up there, and the American people, just as one example of what was occurring at the border, it wasn't just it wasn't just a failure to enforce the border; it was a facilitated invasion. And I mean, most people in Congress knew it, and somehow we just, and I don't even know what my question is. It's just expression of frustration about we don't really have a country we think we do, and we don't have representation. They can give these beautiful speeches, but at the end of the day, they go up to Washington, they go play right along with the deal.
That's right. And it happens at the local level. My husband and I attended a district meeting for our state representatives and our state senator, and they brought all the different municipalities in together, and everybody got to present information, and they left a very short amount of time for public comment. I was there with a lot of my activist friends who all basically gave their speaking time to me. And so I addressed them. I had just come back from Panama, and I addressed them on the border issue, and I explained what I saw. And I simply said, why are we, and I asked my representatives, as Toby Oberdorf specifically, I said, Toby, why are you all going along with Governor DeSantis's great media play to ship these illegals to Martha's Vineyard? I said, it makes great headlines. I get the point. But why not just ship them back where they came from? I said, as a taxpayer, I'm okay with that. I'd rather spend the money going that way than sending them to Martha's Vineyard, which is furthering the entire George Soros and NGO plan to infiltrate all the way into our country with illegals everywhere. And he said to me, Ann, we can't do that. That's illegal. And that's when I realized either he's nuts and lying or he's ignorant to the law. I mean, the fact that they don't know that Florida can deport illegals, that's an invasionary army into our own state, was alarming to me, that he couldn't even cite Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3. And this is my representative that's supposed to have my best interest at heart. And instead, he's more worried about making headlines by, ha, 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 we're sending illegals to Martha's Vineyard. What good does that do our country?
Same thing happened in Texas. You likely know. We were got headlines. People were a little bit excited. This is so great. We sent them to New York City, and even then, I'm thinking, aren't we? This is what we don't want to happen. We already have them crossing the border, and they're being put in planes at our expense and flown around the country. You just picked because you're the Republican governor, and you picked New York City because
Mm-hmm.
it's a Democrat stronghold, and that somehow was isn't that cool? But it wasn't. It was an utter waste of money, and I will say New York City and actually has now caused more trouble in New York than I think they anticipated because they end up putting up in hotels. Okay, so I want to shift to President Trump because I know last night when you spoke, you said something about how let's all celebrate President Trump. I don't do a bunch about him. Number one, today happens to be I think, or maybe yesterday he put out was 50 days he's been in office. He did an announcement: 50 days, 50 accomplishments. And I can't run through all of them, but I will say what you see in Trump is just the opposite of what we were just talking about. He ran, said, I'm going to do these things. And then he just started doing them. And it is really astonishing because I don't see a lot of Republican representation in the House and the Senate standing up and cheering and saying, this is so great. Look, he's doing what we've always said. But he is just, I don't know what the right word is. He's just driven to do the right. So here on my litany of questions. Number one, what do you think? What issue drove the overwhelming victory for him in November? Like with the American people, one or more issues that
Oh,
just
I think the border was one of the biggest issues, frankly, because we exposed that and it became such a hot topic. And then, of course, the violence that was going on with Tren de Aragua taking over apartment buildings. When citizen journalists finally got engaged in this process, and that's what Operation Burning Edge was about, it was force multiplication, using key citizen journalists plus big journalists out there like Epoch and so forth. When that finally gripped and people realized, wow, I do have power. I can go to the border and fill things. It just became a topic that was being discussed everywhere. It was no longer, oh, the poor people. It was, oh my God, they're invading our country. We have an invasion going on. And I think I think that was a big deal for people, frankly. The child trafficking component of it was significant. But again, that is such a, not dangerous, it's a very touchy topic because some people just can't handle the truth about what's going on with these children. It's too painful. It is, and we've tried over and over again to expose this. The Epstein story, the Sound of Freedom movie that came out. My daughter watched it, and she's after 20 minutes, Mom, I can't watch this. And I thought to myself, my gosh, that's vanilla compared to what we know happens to these children. They didn't even show the gory details yet. So I really
yeah,
do think the border was a big topic. And I also think people were just sick of being lied to. They recognized the country
yeah,
was being stolen. And they didn't feel that what happened in 2020, the left came over. A lot of the left recognized that Trump had been mischaracterized by the mainstream media. The media had been completely exposed as a bunch of lying frauds that were here to push a narrative. And so people finally had it, and they just said, we want to take our country back, but we don't know what to do. And this is the transition I see our country having to struggle with right now because Trump is not God. He is a public servant. He works for us, and he has got to execute on what we, the people, want. So we, the people, have to decide what it is we really want. And through the actions of getting the truth, people were coming to terms with what it is they want. They want to restore the safety of our country. They don't want a bunch of lawlessness. They don't want rules for thee and not for me and all this kind of stuff. They want to get their country back. And so we're finding ourselves in this transition, and Trump is facilitating this transition, Debbie, by allowing us to take that local action and having a national impact mantra, as General Flynn discusses all the time, and
yeah,
reinvesting back in our communities. And so I'm hoping what Trump people will take away from the Trump presidency is that what happens in DC doesn't necessarily have to happen in your community. You have a choice through the 10th Amendment and put that up as your firewall from these federal government, shenanigans to say, I'm going to make sure that my community is safe. And we saw it in Florida with Collier County, putting up a Bill of Rights, sanctuary county to protect their Bill
yep,
of Rights, going after fluoride in the water, saying no to the WEF, saying no to the WHO, saying no to the United Nations. And this is where we are right now. It's coming back locally. And this is the transition and the enlightenment that's happening. There's restoring our republic one county at a time. And I think President Trump is highlighting that through the shenanigans of these agencies that are not doing their jobs. They're
yeah.
failures everywhere.
Yeah, I want to hit on Doge, and I want to hit on what I mentioned before we started. I guess I'll do Doge first,
Yeah.
just to say, I think when I feared when there was all this talk before he took office, we're gonna drain the swamp, we're really gonna dig in. that it's exciting to say, and people like you and I are going, yes, this is great, but I didn't know if it would really happen. I didn't know if Elon Musk, who has turned out to be a godsend on this, because he's fearless, and he'll take the slings, and he's both, and he's just relentless. So on to Doge. I heard people at our side, in fact, some dinner we were at, people were talking about, I think they need to take this more slowly and more systematically, and kind of go through each agency and discuss. I couldn't wait till this person stopped talking to just pounce and just, I think what's happened with Doge, it can't happen fast enough. And it has to be in this almost bulldozing format that
Yep.
it is. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are they doing it the way they should? And we'll just react to Doge.
Well, first of all, I love it. This is the people's response to governing. Again, our Constitution, we the people. So we are now taking our accountability piece of it, and we're holding them accountable and showing the fraud, the waste, the abuse that our government has been exercising on behalf of our money. And it's about time that we understand that we're funding circumcisions in Africa. Like, what on earth does that have to do with our own national security? Our Constitution is clear that our government, the federal government, is to protect us. That's it. Not to do circumcisions and study transgender flies in Zimbabwe or whatever the nonsense is.
Yeah.
We have got to get back to basics, and this is what Doge is doing. And to the fact that I think it's not happening fast enough, I agree. I call it bulldozing. We need to bulldoze all the way through.
So good.
We need to bulldoze all the way through all of these things. And you know what? If we defund a few things that were mistakes that we shouldn't have defunded, I'm going to say that is going to be a far smaller price to pay than the trillions of dollars we've squandered over the decades and the millions of lives that we've killed through some of the crimes against humanity, exercising of military industrial complex wars to go and conquest for the benefit of the few select involved in the banking and the military industrial complex. I think we need to bulldoze through all of it. And frankly, if we just go back and read that Constitution and look at our 18 essential services as defined by Congress, what they have authority to do, and we get back to that, we are not going to find ourselves upside down. What's going to happen is the free economy, free market society always figures it out a lot faster than government.
Yep.
They will immediately pick up the slack. So if all of a sudden we don't have a USDA, well, guess what? What's happening today with our food? Look at Americans. We're grossly overweight, and we're full of diabetes and cancer and everything other disease. I think if we go back and get back to the basics, organic farming, and start pushing it back out to the field and take back, like what they're doing in Missouri. Andrew, the Attorney General Bailey is going after China and the COVID stuff to say, what, the judgment. We're going to take back our farms and get that back from you because you've cost us billions of dollars in COVID damage. So I really do think that bulldozing our way through and eliminating this stuff, and if it results in not passing a continuing resolution, and I disagree with President Trump on this, and we defund government to the point the lights turn off for a few days or weeks or months, people back in the States will figure it out. We're going to be okay. Governors have rights. They can exercise calling forth a militia if we have an invasion. We can pick up the slack. We don't need the federal government for the nonsense that it's been shoving down our throats for years, because every single one of these agencies, despite the name, renders the exact opposite impact on what the name says it's supposed to do. So let's not worry about that.
Yeah. On Doge, I have to say, I have loved thinking about, I remember years ago, my husband and I moved to Washington, D.C. We lived there for 4 years. And our kids, we have 3 kids real close in age. They went to some school there. And my daughter befriended some girls. So, she wanted to play at her house. We anyway ended up meeting this girl's parents. And they were both lawyers for the Commerce Department. But I did not know this. And so I was spewing up about reducing the size of government. We got now when these agencies are over. And this was, I don't know, when would this be? 1995, something like that long ago. And I was just on and on about how, the federal government's too large. We could probably line up and count off by 3s, and, the 1s are out of here. Maybe the 1s and 2s are out of here. I mean, and then I realized they were Commerce Department lawyers. It was a very funny conversation. But
I'm sure
this bloated federal government is bad enough just simply on the level of wastefulness of resources and expansion and unjustified, unlawful expansion of the role of the federal government. And the bureaucratic state, impenetrable, unaccountable. You can't do a thing about them. So Doge just eliminating agencies and reducing them in size addresses the issue of them just being too big. But what we're discovering, what is just thrilling to have exposed, is the corruption, the money ending up back in the pockets of the politicians And then on the U.S. aid, to your point a moment ago about U.S. aid, we may make some mistakes and cut something that might have been a good idea, and so I think ultimately, number one, we will, if that really occurs, we'll restore it. I mean,
Right.
it would not immediately, but it'll get restored quickly enough. But the other thing I love about this is forcing this behemoth federal bureaucracy, forcing a significant number of those people to get real jobs in the private sector, to
Right.
get out of government.
Agreed.
It's
Agreed.
yeah, it's an astonishing thing how many people, and once you're kind of in for life. And now they're discovering all these people who work from home, and then the stories I'm sure you're seeing all day, they work from home, but their neighbors say, he has a job down the street at the factory. He's not, and he's working somewhere else. They're not even doing anything.
That's
We've
right.
just had this. So I just, we can't. I'm gonna steal that word, bulldoze. I'll give you credit.
Oh, that's
I'm gonna steal that word, bulldoze.
it is. We need to bulldoze it all. I have no problem with bulldozing the entire thing. And I've offered to give docent tours to all the different agency buildings that are now empty and provide and basically just show how these agencies have basically perpetrated crimes against the American people. I'll do it for free. I'll volunteer my time as a docent and go through the Federal Reserve, go through the IRS, and go through the USDA and the CDC and the FDA, and I'll just on and on. I'll have a work job for life.
You will. You
Yeah.
will indeed. So Doge, I love, and it's really refreshing. It is this feeling. It's kind of the undercurrent. One undercurrent of our conversation is people taking their power back. Taking
Yes.
that is inherently supposed to be ours. I often use the expression, "We are the sovereign." Like we threw off the king back in the time of the founding. We, the people, we are the sovereign, not the government. We are, and we
Right.
decide our future. So I think there's a feel of that. And then I want to turn to this. What Trump has mostly inspired this feeling. He's inspired that putting power back in the hands of people. He's also inspired, and I noticed that when he was running in 2015, he doesn't go in long monologues about the meaning of America, but he made Americans. They heard him, and they said, he made Americans proud to be American again, and he, just because of the way he spoke in a positive way about America and American people, he made people realize how much the left has been over decades denigrating. It's like a psychological attack, a psyop against the American people, thinking, touting America's history is bad, America's an evil country, we're systemically racist, he just renewed in the American people, yeah, we are good people. This is a good country. And I love your thoughts on that. Did you have that same perception about him?
Oh, of course. I think Trump has been the great equalizer for the reality and the truth. I mean, starting with his first press conference, calling out the fake news with that ridiculous fake PP dossier. But let's just say let's just be honest. We elected a multicultural, Barack Obama was half black, half white, right? And we elected a multicultural president. It's not like we're a racist country here. So if we can elect somebody who's half black, half white, and we had another half black, half white, half Indian, I guess she was, Kamala Harris, on the ticket, how racist are we? I mean, look at how we have done more for civil rights in this country than nations around the world. And I think that's why people come here, because they see us as a country that upholds your civil rights. It is a big deal. The only civil rights that aren't being upheld are Americans. And it's really, and I'm not trying to make this a racist discussion, but they are suppressing the white people now in this country. And God forbid if you're a Christian, it's happening all over the world, and they are making us feel guilty for being Christian, which we were a Christian founded nation. Our documents, our founding fathers invoked the word of our Creator 4 times, Debbie. So it's not as if you had to be a Presbyterian, a Catholic, a Lutheran. You could be whatever you wanted. It was the freedom to be and choose your religion. You just weren't going to get the Church of England shoved down your throat anymore.
Yeah.
And that's where they leverage the First Amendment against us. They say, freedom of religion, separation of church and state, and they're taking God out of government. Well, no, God was always supposed to be in the government, which is why In God We Trust was everywhere. And so I think what the establishment that has been trying to take our country back has what we call duality. They have created legal fiction, and then we have law. Constitutional law, law of the land, law of nature, nature is God, for the people on the land. You have legal fiction over here with the bar card carriers, the British accredited registry attorneys. They swear an oath to the Brits, right? To the legal fiction over there, which is made up language that nobody can understand. It has nothing to do with governing what God is protecting us over here through our Constitution and Bill of Rights. So we have got to start to really understand and separate ourselves and say, you know what, we're not fiction. These things don't apply to us, but God has given us and ordained us our rights over here. And I don't want to exchange those rights for your privilege to be something that I'm not. And they've convinced us that we are something that we're not. We love the United States. We love America. But I'm a citizen of Florida and I live in Florida and I used to live in Texas and I love Texas. I love every state. But I choose where I live because that state has rights and my state doesn't tax me on my income. And I want to be there and I like sunshine and the beach and sand between
Yep.
my toes. Some people want to pay those extra taxes because it makes them feel good. Go for it.
Right.
But
Go right ahead.
I would say, please show me what you get for it.
Yeah.
You know, California, show me what you got for that.
Yeah.
So this is what I think Trump is really exposing, and he's bringing that pride back in so that you
Yeah.
can make a choice what's best for your family and own it and be proud about it. And don't feel guilty because you're white, you're black, you're Indian, you're Jewish, you're Christian. Don't be guilty for any of it. Be proud about it. And he wants to inspire that nationalistic, populistic view and bring back pride to our country, no matter who you are. And that's what makes us beautiful, because if we weren't supposed to be that way, God wouldn't have created us in all different flavors, shapes, sizes, religions, cultural ethnicities, places around the earth. I mean, he wouldn't have done it.
You used a word a moment ago about populism, and I want to turn to that because it's an amazing thing. I love that word. I mean, I know that populism has historically been used and attached to movements that were that were wrongly motivated or had some bad agenda. But this rise in the notion that people actually, we are self-governing, we are self-reliant people, and this I don't know what term you find agreeable, but I had heard a speech recently. Someone was talking about, we conservatives get pushed around. We take a position on something, and the media criticizes, and the left criticizes, and pretty soon, okay, well, I didn't really mean that. And so what this guy was saying, which I kind of liked, we are center-right populists. We are populist, meaning we believe in the power of the people. And with America, it's not a rogue thing, because the populism, the activism is always confined by the structure of the Constitution. The populist movement functions within our laws and the structure of the Constitution. But in any case, so it was kind of an interesting thing, because I think that the political party names have been they almost become meaningless. I think it's not really Democrats versus Republicans. It's kind of the patriot populists against the people who kind of push tyranny. They want to have more centralized power and in a small number of people, and it's just a patriotic populism, which it makes me smile when I think about it. It's a very healthy thing.
Well, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. It is the people that believe in freedom and love of country and worship God and family, versus those that feel that somebody else has to take care of them and owes them a living. It's a statist mentality where you want to live in a nanny state because for whatever reason you don't feel capable to do it yourself, and you believe there's somebody better, smarter, stronger, more powerful than you. And to me, I look at this a lot of times, and people that say, "Oh, President Trump's here, thank God. He's going to take care of it."
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? That is the worst thing you can say, and that's the worst attitude you can have, because it takes the responsibility of we the people, as God intended. He gave man dominion over the earth. Let's take it back to the Bible, the original law book, right? This is your basic instructions before leaving earth, right? Our Bible, and it says right in there, man has dominion over the earth, the land, the air, the water. That's our law. And
Beautiful.
If you want to break it down simply, by saying Donald Trump coming in is, oh, thank God we don't have to do anything anymore, is an affront to God. Let's be clear about that. We, the people, are supposed to take control of the situation, and it starts in your own home. Somebody's not coming in and putting your pants on, Debbie. You do it every morning. Someone's not making your breakfast. You do it. You raise your family, and then you go into your community and your neighborhoods and so on and so forth. It sort of moves out locally to nationally. And I think that, we have to get away from that statist mentality. And I want to just touch on this quickly. In North Carolina, we saw this. My husband and I saw what happened in North Carolina, in Asheville, a very blue town that believes in the power of the state. But guess what? When they were flooded out and everything was gone, it was the boys and men and women of Appalachia that have lived off the land and didn't need the state to take care of them. They lived literally off the grid, that came into the cities and helped these people. You had the conservative hard right coming out of the hills to help the people that were the hard left, that were standing around going, what do? We don't have power. We don't have food. And they finally realized the state government of North Carolina wasn't there. FEMA definitely wasn't there. It took a lot of myself and some others cajoling the folks up in in North Carolina to send the 82nd down there out of Fort Bragg, since it's been renamed properly again, out of Fort Liberty.
Yeah. Yeah.
It took the humiliation of that military to come down and come help, and they were there for a short period of time. So, again, this mentality of the government's going to do it for you, I think was really exposed during Hurricane Helene. And I think that's the transition that people are trying to really grapple with. They're having a hard time letting go that isn't the case, and that we're founded on taking care of ourselves.
I love that story, and I actually that you were referring to, it occurred in North Carolina, and how it was the people who already understood how to live off the land, how to
Yes.
that realized, oh, we can help you, we can figure this out, and it really is a kind of a unfortunate side effect of the modern life in America. Life is mostly very comfortable and convenient,
Yeah.
and everything's, the store is going to have sufficient groceries, and the delivery truck's going to take care of everything you need. And when you're really desperate and you're not knowing, that self-reliant thing, you look around, wow, I've become dependent on businesses and services and government, and I'm pretty helpless. We were not created to be a nation of helpless people. We were
Right.
a nation of self-reliant people, which kind of lost that psyche. I'm going to jump a little bit because I mentioned to you before we started. I In the end of January, there was a meeting at the European Parliament in Brussels, of a group. The meeting was called MEGA. It was Make Europe Great Again, and it was made up of people who created a political party. These are member countries of the EU, 26 of them, and the political party is called ECR, European Conservatives and Reformists, and they're basically saying, this mega Make Europe Great Again movement they created. This is echoing Donald Trump, and they were ecstatic over the message of freedom that they heard coming from President Trump. And maybe I was very blessed to get to go to that. I interviewed a lot of these leaders. You really ended up realizing is kind of what we're talking about here. And they realized, wow, we can be self-reliant, and we want that again. And I love your reaction. It's different set of circumstances over there than here, but it's like the world is picking up on Trump's freedom message.
Yeah, they're picking up on the vibe that God created man to be free, and that the Americans, fortunately, were through the perseverance of men and women 250 years ago that gave King George the Heisman and said, "We're out of here. We don't want to live in feudalism anymore. We want to have the land rights beneath our feet." Came to this country and built something very special as God's second covenant nation. And I really believe that, people stood back, in Europe back then and went, these crazy people, they're never going to make it. What are they doing? But we did not only made it, we thrived at it, again, because we were allowed to be free and make of it as we wanted. And of course, everybody wanted to be great. Nobody wanted to come over here and fail and live a life of misery. People came over here because they believed in freedom. They believed in worshiping God to the tune of whatever that was for them. And they believed that they could do it. And that is something that Europe and people around the world, frankly, they just didn't believe that, because they've lived under oppression. They've lived under tyranny and dictators and kings and queens and rulers for millennia. And so to see this great experiment, and we're still an experiment, and we've been vacillating on whether or not we're going to survive this experiment. Yeah. But I believe people are seeing the resurgence in America, and all eyes have been on us for quite some time, wondering what in the heck we're doing under this Biden regime. They couldn't understand why we were doing this. But again, the people rose up, they started speaking out, they took to the microphones, and they started explaining what we all now know to be true, is that we've been under control of a very bad group of people that are all part of this bloodline lineage that has controlled the world for millennia. And people have had it. They're now getting back to God. We're bringing God back. Mike Lindell said it beautifully, that this election theft of 2020 would be the greatest revival for Jesus Christ. And he was right.
Yeah.
Because again, we started to see how much evil there was when you lose control of your freedom. And as I told my husband, I got baptized in July of 2021 because I finally recognized, my God, when there's this much evil, there must be a counterbalance to it. And it wasn't because I was an atheist. It was just because I'd never been baptized. And I said, I have got to save my own soul, because I see that you can't have this much evil without this much God. So let's go make sure God knows whose side I'm on.
I think you already knew, but
yeah. Well, your work says so much, but sometimes you got to really just, you got to drive it home. So.
Oh, absolutely. There is a lot of conversation like that about people in America thinking that for a long time we tried to solve our problems with policies and new statutes and new regulations and bullet point outlines of how we're going to solve some problem. but it's a really just an amazing, heartwarming clarity that's kind of rising among the patriots that we got this nation, we received this nation from our founders because they recognize, as you mentioned a moment ago, the Creator was mentioned in the Declaration. You know, we have God-given rights, and that they are inherent. And I was that just because you were born, you have life, liberty, pursuit. So those that foundational structure, we kind of forgot about it. We thought we were too smart for God. We got away from it. We thought laws will solve it all. And there was really a renewal of faith in America that is just heartwarming.
It's the works. It's not what you're saying. If your lips are moving, you might be lying. It's the works that you're doing. What are you doing to walk in that faith and to show that you are self-reliant and rely, and that you know that God has presented everything on the planet we need in order to make a go of it, and to put everything into these policies. I understand the need for the written word, but through the written word, legal fiction has found loopholes, right? Our government is nothing but a giant loophole factory for themselves. And these people don't pay taxes. They don't do any of it because they found their way through the loopholes, putting offshore accounts and doing all the stuff. They set it up so that we don't know how to do all that fancy stuff, but that we fund what it is they want us to fund. And it keeps us in this debt slavery. And this is why President Trump talking about elimination of the income tax is a very powerful conversation. And it's a threat to them because it's going to upend not only their debt slave control over us, the mental control they have over us, and the financial control. But again, is there really that much financial control when they can just print whatever they want financially? Do we really need to pay taxes in the end? They're printing it anyway. But this money is fake. It's all based on a fake and a fraud. And when people finally realize that there's no value in the paper dollar, but it's in the resources that our country has, including the people and our intellectual property we bring to the table, I think we're in that process of seeing this shift, Debbie, where we're going to restore sound money as defined in our Constitution, where things are packed by gold and silver only. That's the tender. But perhaps we need to add that element of the new technology, of blockchain, of being able to track these assets so that we know where the gold is. Because right now, what is Elon doing next month? He's auditing the gold in Fort Knox because we don't even know if it's, what's there?
I know,
right?
We don't know.
Yeah.
I do want to come back to Europe one more moment because I think there's an amazing thing going on. And I don't know if you followed the situation in Romania, because a gentleman who happened to reach out and invite me to come to EU, the Make Europe Great Again, he refers to, so Romania had presidential elections end of last year. They have multiple parties, and so they didn't have a clear winner. No one got a majority, but the plurality winner was a guy who my Romanian friend refers to as the Trump of Romania, Colin Georgescu.
Yes.
And so he was running on the same kind of things Donald Trump did. We want to restore the sovereignty of Romania. We believe in the individual people here. We don't want to have, and they point to the EU in particular, they don't like the immigration policies being forced on these countries. They don't like the climate policies being forced in these countries. They don't like the transgender, and even more broadly than that, they see it as an attack on their Judeo-Christian roots. They speak very openly about this as an attack on families, churches, faith, and children, the whole transgender movement, the LGBTQ movement. And so this was one candidate said, we want to be Romania again. He's not saying necessarily dissolve the EU or withdraw, but reduce the amount of power they have over us. Other candidate was the leftist running on yay, we love the EU, which is kind of like in America saying we love big government.
Right.
And so what occurred just a couple of days ago, so they have this election supposed to go to runoff. Romanian parliament canceled the runoff 2 days before, allegedly because they discovered, and it's astonishing that parallel to America, they discovered election interference by Russia. Shockingly. Well, a couple of days ago, whatever the entity is in their government that decides these things, announced that Georgescu is ineligible. He can't run. He's ineligible because of corruption. So they have, and I was thinking how parallel that was to the lawfare against Trump.
Oh yeah,
the whole 4 years. Love your reaction to that.
Oh, it's 100% that. Look, the left has nothing new. The establishment is losing control because the populist movement is rising. People are waking up that they're supposed to be free and not held under tyranny. And Georgescu, phenomenal Trumpian, represents populist beliefs that people should be free and that we don't need this massive big state, nanny state government. The playbook of the establishment is old and tired. They are not, they don't have an original thought to save their lives and to
Yeah.
save their regime and their power. So they're recycling what they've already tried here. It failed miserably, and it's going to fail over there. These are the types of things that are backfiring, and you're seeing it. Let's look at South America, for instance. Traditionally a socialist, communist, sort of burgeoning communist sort of area, and we've seen a lot of communist nations move in there, the Chinese and the Iranians, just for instance. But you're seeing the elections of libertarians like Milei, Bukele in Central America, basically looking at everybody in his cabinet saying, we're going to investigate all of y'all because I know there's massive corruption here. The people are putting people into power and they're pushing back. And this has been the age-old biblical battle of good versus evil. You've got evil that is going to try and control, and they're going to try and keep power and money. And then you've got people like Georgatos who are going to fight back because he represents the will of the people. And I do believe ultimately you might have a revolution in that country. And I think we're going to see revolutions happening everywhere, whether they're physical, they're with actual bullets flying. But we're in a revolution right now in this country,
Yes,
and it's
we
a
are.
revolution of ideas. Do we want big government or do we want freedom? And that's what's happening around the world right now. And I believe it's unfortunately, what is it they say? The blood of patriots it must what is it? The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing happen worldwide, and it's a beautiful thing.
It is,
and
it
I
makes
think
me
God
smile.
is rejoicing.
Yeah. Well, I have one friend who's been sending me clips periodically
Yeah.
because in Romania the protests are unending.
That's
People
right.
just show up and they're out.
They're
the streets again
J6ing
today. Yeah.
They're J6ing.
Oh, I know. It's so actually that's my next topic.
Okay.
We do have time to talk about J6, but I do think those people at some point, the establishment that thinks we can ride this out, these people will settle down. They'll finally, okay, fine, we'll go vote for we'll be they'll the people will go along with our agenda. They're going to find out that people just will not submit. And at some point, what do you do when they just will not submit? And I think it will happen in Romania. I've been down the path many times about things occurring in Central and South America. That's freedom spirit just about melts you. It's wonderful. Okay, so on J6, I know you've done shows. I think you had a fairly recent show with Simone Gold on and John Strand and some others. Yeah. So on that one, I've, as you might imagine, covered it frequently. Also, I do think in that one, there needs to be certainly a cleaning out of the DOJ and the FBI, but there needs to be criminal liability in some cases for the way the raids were conducted and the choices of prosecution. What do you think? And prosecuting, what do you think about that?
Oh gosh, the DOJ needs to be completely gutted from top to bottom. I mean, it's that is not an institution that is upholding your constitutional rights. None of these J6ers had any of their constitutional rights protected.
Right.
Many of them had habeas corpus suspended. They were languishing in these gulags. They were experiencing what we call diesel therapy, where they were moved from gulag to gulag and constantly shifted around. The gulag conditions were horrific. I mean, you'd be better off maybe in a third world prison in some of these instances of where they were. But the most significant piece was they were just not heard. They never got their day in court. And if they did go to court, it was in a DC courtroom where 9 out of 10 people voted for the other guy. So you're not getting a jury of your peers. If you're from Missouri or from Florida or from Kansas and you were a J6, you were arrested, you should be in front of your jury of your peers in your own home state. They did not get afforded that. They were all, when they did get a hearing, it was in a DC courtroom. And they were railroaded, absolutely railroaded. And they put trumped up charges. These 1512 obstruction charges were a joke. And I will tell you, I was there. I actually saw the Capitol Police holding the doors open to the rotunda where Simone Gold was in.
Yeah.
And, people like Dr. Gold, I think she's phenomenal. She had to take a plea deal. And it doesn't mean she's less for not standing on her constitutional rights and saying, you're not going to oppress me. But let's face it, she's a doctor. She's a lawyer. She's running a business. She had a foundation. She didn't have time to be J6 and locked away for 3 years. Her, significant other, John Strand, said, I am going to take that stand because it's principle. And he was really mistreated. I mean, held in solitary confinement for what? For standing in the rotunda where the Capitol Police allowed you to go in there. There was no stopping. By the time I showed up, there were no barricades. There was nowhere to demark where you could be or could not be that day. The jurisdictional boundaries were not defined and they were not upheld. And there was no accountability and responsibility being put upon the mayor of D.C., the Capitol Police, Nancy Pelosi, the sergeant at arms. the Capitol architect, all these people are culpable with the lack of jurisdictional enforcement that day when they were offered National Guard by President Trump. They rejected it all. And now we know that they set it up so that we would look like a bunch of insurrectionists with 200 FBI agents there, with Antifa, with Black Lives Matters, with Ukrainian operatives there dressed up as MAGA supporters. It was a really highly sophisticated, coordinated event. You should have Ivan Raiklin on. He can walk you through it better than anybody on the planet. He has it all down to every single individual and their roles and responsibilities and culpability in all of this.
Yep. I think one thing on the story of J6, there are many Americans who still need to get, leaving aside individual cases of people prosecuted, they need to understand that it was a setup, that it was a government operation to and basically delegitimize Trump, delegitimize his supporters, cause people in Congress to decide not going to send this back to the states as some members of Senate and House were contemplating. They were just going to force the decision, the certification of the election, the fraudulent election. It was a setup, and there's a need for people to understand that, because it changes. I've noticed talking to people, it changes your sympathies about these cases. If you think that it really was an insurrection and it really was people threatening the future of our republic, then you get one reaction. But when you start to realize how much it was orchestrated, and I think it changes the way people see it. I actually think, in addition to the DOJ being cleaned out, many FBI officers leaving the job, I actually think the judiciary within the district court, federal district court, and the Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C., at the very least should be recalled, because many of them, they are actually lawyers, they're judges, they're lawyers, they understand what Section 1512 was supposed to do. They should have been unwilling to allow that prosecution to occur. They should have dismissed that and I know in some of the cases, the lawyers made the argument to the court, this law doesn't really apply, but this shouldn't be a charge in this case. I think there's a case to be made that many judges need to be removed because of their conduct in those cases.
Well, again, to something a story we broke, Todd Callender, who's an attorney, had done some research along with a lady named Lisa McGee going back into late 2022. And the reason this research was done is we were looking at why is the military forcing this mandate with an experimental gene therapy on the military? We're putting our military, our national sovereignty, our national security at risk by putting an experimental drug and forcing it on everybody in our military. So the question of the oath of office of Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, came up. And so Lisa McGee looked into a Freedom of Information Act request on Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin's oath of office to say, is this guy really legitimately sworn in? As it would turn out, 9 months after 9 months of going back and forth with the powers that be, they could not produce a written oath of office for Lloyd Austin. So to be clear, according to their legislative democracy rules, their U.S. code, which is what governs that 10 square miles of Washington, D.C., a federal corporation, by the way, their own code defines the United States, which is defined in the circumference of Washington, D.C., 28 U.S.C. 3002-15A, United States is a federal corporation. So understanding that corporation is governed by their U.S. code, 5 U.S.C. 3331, 5 U.S.C. 3332 are specifically for your oath of office. One is to stand with your hand on the Bible and swear. The other one is to sign that sworn statement. They could not produce a signed sworn statement. You need both of those in order to be officially considered serving as a public servant lawfully in our government. Lloyd Austin and every member of Biden's cabinet, including Kamala Harris, and then we did the district judges in D.C., the federal judges, and we started going nationwide. You would be shocked at how many people, including all of the federal circuit court judges in D.C., don't have oaths of office properly filed for their record.
What's the answer to the question? Okay, so they got sloppy on procedure, but it doesn't really matter.
Was it sloppy, or was it designed to protect them from treason? Because if you're not properly sworn in, are you actually serving? And does the 18 U.S.C. 2381 treason statute actually apply to you if you are now doing things that are against the safety of our country?
So what you just said argues that it was an intentional. I'm not arguing with it. An intentional circumvention.
I believe, my personal opinion, it was definitely an intentional circumvention around what they had to actually do
to free them or protect them from
being charged with treason. Absolutely. The worst at this point, it's a felony charge for posing as a public official unlawfully. Um, so they could probably circumvent death.
So this would be something, if this were to be pursued, the DOJ could go after these people for a federal charge of impersonating an officer.
Correct.
Yeah.
If they so choose to do it. If they so choose to do it, we have to determine, I guess we have to sit back and watch to see if Pam Bondi and the DOJ have the stomach for that. But her stomach is going to be, it should be dictated from our stomachs. What do the people want? Do we want these people charged with treason? Do we want to go after them and lock them up? I personally say yes, because look at the damage they did, not only the people who suffered at the hands of a corrupt DOJ, a lawless DOJ, but look at the mental anguish and look at what our country went through.
Yeah. On that note of what our country went through in J6, I'm just realizing we're about out of time. This went by quickly. But on the J6 people, I know I've had Drs. Simone Gold and John Strand, others on my show. John Strand is really articulate, talking about the idea that we have to do more than just, okay, great, it was a pardon. He's beginning to talk about the term reparations.
Yes.
And I have to say, I love the idea of really, the reason I like reparations in this case, because I love the focus it will require for the country and the federal government to say on what happened to those people, on the wrongness of the charges, of bringing charges against them, of the cost to their lives. Because if you're an average Joe citizen and you show up in Washington one day to whatever reason you went, because you love Trump, because you think the election was stolen, and you end up being charged, you lose out on you as legal fees at the very least, or you end up with a public defender, and it is uprooting of your life, as loss of, if you go to prison, which many of them did, you lose your livelihood, your job. People lost their homes, their families were divided. The toll on innocent Americans who didn't do anything wrong is astronomical, and that's the reason I love the reparations idea. I want to force focus on that, because when you are when you're in the federal government and you bring criminal charges against people who are really innocent, you understand that. You understand that you are going to cost them, individual Americans, many of whom do not have the savings sufficient to pay for a lawyer. You're going to ruin them financially, personally, and culturally. And it's a very big, it's a huge condemnation of those prosecutors, of all of them.
Yes, it is a huge condemnation of the prosecutors, because again, they're using laws inappropriately to now send in an FBI. I mean, Jeremy Brown, for instance, I spoke about him last night, Green Beret, was framed by the FBI because he would not submit to them to become a confidential informant in an organization known as the Oath Keepers, which is standing up for our rights and protecting our freedoms. So when you have an FBI that is going up against free people who want to assemble and redress grievances and petition the government and just speak, you now understand that who are the brown shirts here? Who's the criminal organization? It's not we the people. We're the government. And God, remember, God created man, man created government. It's from the top down. We the people are the government. And when you have members of Congress that will reflexively say, whoa, 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 I'm the federal government, I'm on top, and I'm not going to listen to you. And that comes directly from a member of Congress here in Texas, Morgan Luttrell, brother of Marcus Luttrell, this Navy SEAL, lone survivor. When you have members of Congress, just like I have a state representative that does not understand the Constitution and can't reflect on the fact that God created man and man created government, so that's your hierarchy, that's the boss man up here, President Trump works for us, that's breathtaking in of itself, because that is a downstream ramification of everything that we do in this country and how we live. And we have just got to fundamentally understand that power structure first and foremost. And once we get that in our heads solidly, everything else seems to take care of itself. But until we really reflect on that and understand it, we're going to continue to be in this sort of feedback loop where we constantly submit to a higher authority that's not God. And we're submitting to the wrong higher authority. There's only one, and it is God. And God created us, and then we create the government, and we have to dictate to them what they do and how they can and cannot protect our rights.
Just imagine if every voting American believed that, what you just said. I mean, honestly, how America would change. Yeah.
It's simple.
Yeah.
It's not complicated, but government has complicated everything with all of their rules, codes, and statutes. And when you start to hear ordinances and
regs,
you get confused with all these numbers, and it's just too much. Who could remember all that? And the IRS code is ridiculous. Again, we were never supposed to pay income or tax on our income and our labor.
Oh,
that's anti-God.
That'd be a beautiful thing if they could actually
I
undo IRS.
I really
Okay,
hope they do.
Ann Vandersteel, this is impossibly fun. I want to make sure for our listeners, you know again, you can find her on X or Twitter at Ann Vandersteel, AnnVandersteel.com, American Made Foundation. We didn't even get to that.org, and also you are on your show on Rumble. Actually, just tell people, how do you want people to find you?
I think it's as easy as if you go to, if you're on Twitter at Ann Vandersteel or AnnVandersteel.com, because it has all of my social links there. Substack, everything.
Okay, but your shows are on Rumble, and once
They're
you get,
all found on my website.
yeah, a little bit addicting once you start looking at them. They're like, oh, I want to listen to one more. Just you do a great job interviewing and talking about things very, very much. So, well, I thank you for this time. I know you are
appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
very much in demand, and just thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much.